second. It's like, all right, welcome. Welcome everyone to our Hope Hour. I'm so excited to see so many familiar faces with us. I know there's some people trickling in. Give them some minutes and feel free to use the chat box. Check in where you're joining us from today, from the comfort of your living room, the office, maybe a coffee shop. All right. And Sunita San Diego, nice. We have some of our colleagues heading to San Diego today. Oh, doggies. Love doggies. Love pets. Love animals, period. Well, thank you once again for joining us. So great to see so many familiar faces. My name is Leah Gonzalez, and I am the Senior Program Manager here at Hope. I'm so excited to welcome you here. It's the 5th webinar for the Hope Hour series. I know many of you have joined us since the beginning, which we kicked off in June. However, the series was created as a way to continue offering learning and development opportunities to the fabulous Latinas we have in the network. I know we are always striving and looking forward for more opportunities to share education, share knowledge. We have an amazing set of women with us today. And whether you're a current college student, a working professional, this is a series open to everyone, where you can be ensured that you can leave each and one of the webinars with something new, something you're going to take away. So we hope that this series gives you the chance to connect with other Latinas, gain new skills in the comfort of your home, workplace, or wherever you might be. As I shared, I know in a couple of our other webinars, I've been able to connect with some of you through LinkedIn. So very happy to expand the network through this avenue and through this platform. So with that, I'm going to just take a second to continue reading. We have a lot of folks from the Bay Area, Chicago. I love that. Illinois, another San Diego. So thank you so much for your time, for being with us today. And again, if there's something that resonates with you, feel free to use the chat box. Don't be afraid. It's the tool for us today. We have questions, any question, anything related to Hope, anything related to Liz or Sonja and their trajectory and the work that they're doing. Feel free to just jump in there. So to get this conversation started, we're going to jump on it just because we have so many questions for our two ladies that we're going to be having us today. And I know I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A as well. So I want to take the time to introduce our first guest, Liz Atlee. Liz, as we all come to know her, she's the first vice chair of Hope's board of directors. Liz is a California native with roots and work experience in Mexico City. Most recently, she was the chief ethics and compliance officer at CBRE, a global development corporation with 115,000 employees in 37 countries. She lends her time to various philanthropic initiatives and has been recognized as a top Latina executive in the U.S. by the Latino Leaders magazine and the Association of Latino Professionals for America, ALPHA. She is admitted to practice to all California courts of the United States District Court, Central District of California, and the United States Courts of Appeals in the Ninth Circuit. She received her BA in political science from Yale and a JD from USC. Our second guest is Sonja Diaz, a civil rights attorney and policy advisor renowned for her pioneering work in advancing equitable representation opportunities for Latinas. She is a co-founder of the Latina Futures 2050 Lab, where she champions a vision where Latinas have equal access to leadership roles, contributing to a thriving society for all. Prior to her groundbreaking work with Latina Futures 2050 Lab, Diaz co-founded and directed the UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Institute, the first comprehensive think tank, sorry about that, within the University of California systems, dedicated to addressing the policy needs of the nation's second largest racial ethnic group. Latinos. Before her academic leadership roles, Diaz served as a policy counsel to Vice President Kamala Harris. During her tenure as a California Attorney General, Sonja holds a JD from UC Berkeley School of Law, an MPP from UCLA, and a BA in politics from UC Santa Cruz. Please join me in giving Liz and Sonja a big welcome. And as mentioned, we're going to jump in right into the panel. So first of all, welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for your time, for joining us today. Let's begin with introductions. I know I read your beautiful summary and there's so much to it, but please share with us about your professional trajectory, and could you highlight those key milestones that led you to where you are now?
Sure, I'll just start because my last name's A. So, Diana knows what I'm talking about. So first of all, thank you to Hope, and thank you to all of you ladies who are here. I put my LinkedIn link in the chat, so please feel free to link in if you have any questions about working in large public corporations, private companies. You'll hear a little bit more about what I'm doing now. Feel free to reach out. I believe very much in the hermanidad that we have at Hope, in mentoring, in being here for each other. There is no reason that you need to go through anything alone. And if I can't help you, I can find someone who can help you. So please use the LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out. It's really important that we take the time to help ourselves and in that way help each other. And so thank you for having me here. As you heard my intro, I'm very well educated. I have a family here in Los Angeles, mostly adult. My youngest is 21 years old, a senior in college. My oldest is 26-year-old, going to get married in February to his 10-year-long girlfriend, now fiance. And my middle child is living and working in New York, working for Anheuser-Busch. So I have been in public corporations for 25 of my 35-year legal career. And so I know for kind of the social structure, the corporate world, I definitely know for maybe sexism, racism, misogyny, those kinds of things, having kind of started my career before sexual harassment was even a term that was used. So I'll just leave you with that. You heard from Leah everything else about where I've worked and where I went to school, and I'll turn it over to Sonja.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. In terms of introducing myself, I'm a second-generation Chicana college student on my dad's side, fourth-generation Angelino. So have an immense level of gratitude to be able to live in the city that I grew up in, because I know that's not the case for a lot of people. I love Los Angeles. I love California, but I also love this country. I love traveling and meeting new people. And I have a very big appetite for curiosity and learning. And I think that that has really led me not only throughout my career, but into big risks in my career, and also in understanding what it means to be a public servant and a public leader, that's intimately tied with having long-lasting, direct curiosity and relationships with communities. And sometimes that requires being very intentional and breaking the silos that I also, as a highly educated Chicana, find myself in my personal life. And so with that, I mean, as a person, I believe in justice. I was raised as the eldest of three to be anything I wanted to be. And in fact, really supported and expected to lead and to excel. And there weren't really any alternatives for me, but the work that I do now as the eldest and the daughter to two people who in many ways were a lot of the first, but always kept community at the center.
I love that. I think that's one of our biggest things, finding our passion and working with the community. So thank you for sharing, both Sonja and Liz. The next question is, we know that leadership's not linear. What are some of the biggest lessons you learned as a leader? What advice would you give yourself now looking back?
Sonja, why don't you go first this time? We'll go back.
Okay. I'm a millennial, and my work experience and my career parallels things that were very much outside of my control and the control of my generation. Namely the increasing, skyrocketing costs to attend college, including public higher education here in California, the Great Recession and the impact that that had on the workforce when I graduated college, when I was in graduate school, when I came out of law school, and ultimately this country's stubborn persistence of inequality around gender and race. And so it is very difficult, I understand, for people that identify as women to have linear careers. I'm still waiting for my loan forgiveness letter. April, I believe, was my last qualifying monthly payment for public service, but it was not a 10-year linear process. We are shape-shifting and leaving and moving and lateraling to be able to either safeguard our dignity, our autonomy and agency, or continue to make progress on the economic demands of us. And that was certainly true for me. I never anticipated that I would go to law school as a young person. I never desired to be a lawyer. But I now understand both the role of the law for bad, the need for it in public policy, and the idea of it as a puzzle of sorts and a tool set for me to manifest justice. Had I not pursued a legal education, many of the things and the great ideas that community said that they want and that research supports would be unlawful in today's federal courts. And having gone to law school, I now understand that, and I understand how to use language to be very neutral and creative. And so for me, I think, I stayed in school to get ahead, because I felt like if I would have just gone into the workforce after graduate school, I would have been a Chicana getting somebody coffee, and my parents didn't raise me like that. And I wanted to work in the White House. So I elected to apply to law school, and my clarity was not to be a lawyer, but to have something that my male peers, frankly, would not be able to achieve, and that was to go to a top-tier law school. I had no interest in going to a private school. I wanted to still be around multidimensional people. I wanted there to be a level of creativity and curiosity. And in that way, there was really only one choice, and that was Berkeley Law School. And that opened so many doors for me. I got to the White House. I worked at the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and really found a passion for democracy that, again, comes back to my story of being a young Chicana on the East Side who grew up from a young age with a Latina political superstar in Gloria Molina. And that is very much rooted in the law, rooted in voting rights jurisprudence, and it's part of my story in this city.
So non-linear careers are probably the most exciting careers, I would say. My dad, who was the US born citizen in my parents' relationship, was a lawyer, personal injury lawyer for braceros. So the braceros would come over, they'd get in car accidents, and so he would sue the car manufacturing companies under product liability law, which in the 60s and 70s was brand new law. And that's how he met my mom. He was doing some legal work in Mexico City and got set up on a blind date. And my mom, who hated Americans, said, when does he leave? On Saturday? Okay, I'll go out with him Friday night because I don't want him calling me all weekend, right? And then they fell in love, and unfortunately he died when I was very young. So, but kind of the silver lining of that is that I really identified much more with my Mexican side of my family. I went to live there for extensive periods, although never had a permanent address there, learned Spanish fluently, etc. So using all of that, I actually was kind of thought to go to law school. my grandfather in Mexico was a lawyer, a judge, a senator. My dad was a lawyer. I have a half sister who is a lawyer. So I went to Yale, and they're like, then you will go to law school. So I actually got out and went to public relations for 3 years, which was great because I learned how to be a crisis management expert, and taught by Al Tortorella, who did that. Many of you on this call will not even know what it is because it was before you were born, but way back when the Tylenol capsules were injected with a poison. And Johnson & Johnson had a crisis about it, and it was the first recall ever in the United States of a major product. So I worked with Al. He taught me how to do crisis management. Then I went to law school kind of as a backup, like, had PR in the backup. So if law school didn't work out, I would be back in PR. But it worked out. And I actually also worked at MALDEF for one of my summers. And so that was wonderful. And then I got out and was a young associate, and that life was okay, but I also wanted to have children. I was married. So I jumped over into, that was the start of my corporate legal career with ARCA, which was an oil company, and which was great work. It wasn't heart related work. It was definitely pocketbook related work and being available for my children, which eventually, as you know, came. And there I went from litigation and being straight in litigation, and I jumped over into franchise work, and then I jumped over into the supply chain, and then I helped prepare the president of the company for congressional hearings. So saying yes is a very important way, even if you think it might be a little lateral or it might even be a little behind. But if you say yes to that next assignment with exactly the curiosity that Sonja says she, has driven her, if you go in with the curiosity and the openness and the ability to ask for help and ask questions, you will grow. And that reputation of saying yes and being able to tackle hard jobs will help you in the long run. It'll help you, A, learn how that when you jump into that deep end of the pool, how to swim, and then B, your reputation for the people around you with whom you work and in the community will grow, and they'll look at you as someone who will step up to the plate. Even if the plate is undefined, like they know you'll help define it. And so I had a similar career at CBRE where I went from the global head of litigation, where I'm very comfortable, to the chief ethics and compliance officer, which I had, I knew the risks, but I didn't know for compliance, and was very, successful there. So I think, yes, careers should not be ladders. They should be jungle gyms, and don't be afraid of that.
I love that. And I love how you started with not a linear career is the most interesting careers. I'm a firm believer of that, even though sometimes I'm afraid of change. So thank you both for sharing. So one of the reasons you ladies were both invited is because both of you have been and held very high key leadership positions at huge organizations and offices. One at a public university, another one at a C-suite of a global corporation. So the other reason is that you both undergone some recent career transitions. So for those in the audience who might be considering career employment transitions, even though, as I mentioned, it could be scary, what are some of the internals and maybe external considerations you or we need to consider when making these big decisions?
Yeah. People transition for a variety of reasons, and that's true of Latina workers and Latina professionals, whether it's a family move or illness or getting out of a hostile work environment, or wanting to have an entirely different change. And all of those require some thinking, not just in terms of your household, but thinking about what the next step is. I always counsel people about, the economic considerations, recognizing that could elongate your calendar, right? And how to do it prudently. For those that absolutely need to get out of a place for a variety of reasons, thinking about where it is that they want to go in the time period, and then the story about a jump and a jump. With the way that the economy has changed, it's very common to be switching jobs every 2-3 years. And so whereas in the past, you know, there would be some anxiety over why did you leave or why are you consistently moving? That hasn't been my experience as someone who's hired a lot. For me personally, I actually want to talk about one transition, which was from the State Department of Justice. And that transition was important for me because I was on the younger end. And I was just really feeling like I wanted to be in an office where women could lead, where women had control over their creative portfolio, where they were able to have agency over their intellectual contributions. And so for the first time in my lifetime, I was open to everything and anything. And the way that I transitioned was I had someone in my household say, you need to switch jobs. And so it's always, you know, the people that you trust. And for me, and thinking about, well, where do I want to go? Well, those are my variables, right? Where women can lead, where I can still have agency over my portfolio, where I can make these intellectual contributions in my own voice, orally and written. And so I went through a very long process of cross-sector for the first time in my life, because I was always very clear, like, I want to go to the White House. I want to do voting rights. I want to be in a front office of a political executive. So I looked into technology companies in corporate America for the first time. As someone who really cares about justice, I saw the time frame of it to go in-house into a major technology company and do government affairs, public policy, or law would have a lot of impact because there was not a regulatory scheme telling these companies what to do. And so if I could help them meet their bottom line, but also integrate equity, then that would just be baked in and replicated. And so in that way, you know, I started talking to my peers in my age group who, you know, went to Stanford for college or elsewhere, or, you know, through the law school network. And so I was talking to people at Pinterest. I interviewed YouTube and Google and Facebook. You learned about the referrals. Like this was like a whole other world for me. And at the same time, you know, applied to some nonprofits. And my financial consideration was I had to pay rent, right? So I had to pay rent. And so I had a lot more leeway in that. And ultimately, I elected to do a very big risk, which was to go on a presidential campaign, because what I had also been doing was reaching out to former colleagues of mine in academia. And through that came the idea of the Latino Policy and Politics Institute, but the timing wasn't right. So ultimately, I went on the presidential campaign. It was the first time I was a paid staffer on a presidential. I thought I was like going into the frat house and was not going to be fun. But it made sense for this story, leaving a political office, going to another one. And ultimately for me, it was to defeat Donald Trump. That was my clear motivation as a baby of California during the 90s with Prop 187. What I'll tell you about that transition is that it was really wonderful. It was a huge risk. I drove across the country. I like shopping. I like thrift shopping and antiquing. That is what I think I'm the best at in life. So I stopped everywhere, right? I plotted it out. My partner met me in Texas, drove with me through Georgia, got to see this country, lived with two families, strangers, both white families from the South. And I like to think that, you know, it was a study abroad experience in the US South for me. I was in Virginia and Richmond. And my colleagues in the legal department on the campaign did not look like me. Didn't have the same kind of cultural cadence or experiences, really either from the Mid-Atlantic or the Northeast. And they were wonderful colleagues. They were so nice. They were easy to work with. And we had a great time. And I think it's because the hiring lead that put that team together brought myself, who had not been on a paid campaign, brought another colleague of mine who was working at a firm, had not been on a paid campaign, and another colleague who had done the conventions. And then we had all these volunteers. And I'll tell you why that transition was so important. I took a risk. I went all in. I learned in the experience that these risks, these jumps are going to continue for the rest of my career. It doesn't matter if I'm president, EVP, etc. Because there were so many highly accomplished women professionals, whether they were partners at law firms, executive vice presidents for financial industry, who were volunteering their time on this campaign the last 2 months with the hopes of pivoting, of going into the administration. And so one has to wonder, when you hit the pinnacle, why still? And I accepted that. We're going to continue to do this dance. And I think that transition was really good for me because it gave me a lot of experience in this country that I would have never gotten before.
Thank you. Liz?
Wow. I mean, I just want to talk to Sonja about like pivoting. But so here's what I say. I think when you are facing a transition, you do need to take some inventory. You need to say exactly what are the things, what are your goals? How will this help you meet those goals? Because there should be something you're staying true to. You know, Sonja is very clear about women having a voice, and your goal can't just, there should be some financial component, because you should be, you know, be able to believe in yourself and earn your own keep, etc. But it shouldn't be strictly financial, because you will end up bankrupt, that just spiritually bankrupt, if you're only going for the dollar. So keep that in mind. Because a lot of people I know have kind of little crises in the long run if they're only going for the dollar. So think of what is the bigger thing. The other point that I make often that people kind of shy away from is there are very few decisions that you can't undo. So don't be afraid of making a mistake. You make a mistake, you can generally fix it. There are few that you can't. Life or death, right? That's one. But in most of our careers, there aren't really life or death decisions. It's whether or not you go in one path or another. And if you find yourself going down a certain path and you don't like it, there are few times where you won't be able to fix it, you know, even if it takes a little bit of time. So don't let fear be a driver of your direction, because then you will stay stuck. So don't be afraid of that. And then the third thing I would say, again, and I think that's a theme of what I'm trying to get across, is ask for help, ask for input. Sonja had the input of some people who loved her, who said, you have to quit your job, right? Ask I've heard a lot of reference in my life to your personal board, right? Have some friends that know who you are and can see you from the outside. Get a bottle of wine and a pizza and say, okay, let's whiteboard me. What should I do next? In fact, I'm having that for myself soon. So, and it's embarrassing, because how come you're going to invite a bunch of people over to talk about you, but you have blind spots about yourself? So ask people you trust and who love you, or who just respect you. Like, what do you see about me? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Where should I go? You know, you will surprise yourself. But you have to be open to what you hear about that. So I think those are some things to think about when you're transitioning. Does it require school? Does it require a certification? Does it require learning? I'm soon going to announce the fact that I'm a chair of a newly started private company. You know, I'm doing private company board governance. I'm learning that right now. I have the private company board book, right? Like, what do you have to learn? What do you have to sharpen your skills on? What do you know, where do you ask questions? I think transition is very, very, very scary for a lot of people. And that's why you don't have a lot of people like really going for their golden ring. But, you know, we're all here to help you.
Thank you. It's always about building community and finding Latinas like yourself that can guide us, younger folks, or just not even younger, people who are in that transition period. So thank you.
Mhm.
Sonja, the next question is for you. From your perspective, what strategies have you found effective in advocating? Can you give us an example of one that you've seen played out, and what qualities or strength must a good advocate possess?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a political moment in our country where language matters, but language is also confusing because we may be saying the same thing, but it means different things, and that's on purpose. And I think advocacy is that, and being an advocate, people can be advocates for tobacco use or guns, and they're exceptionally effective. I think that the advocates that have sought to limit women's reproductive freedom have been exceptionally effective, and learning the machinations of that is very crystal clear. Yes, it requires investment, but I think ultimately cooperation across a coalition that ultimately can penetrate. And so that was, a state, federal, legislative, judicial plan, and it was longstanding and required discipline, and ultimately became a force and a litmus test for elected office for one political party. And so that is advocacy, and that is stellar. It has to do with messaging, it has to do with interest group convergence. In terms of the things that I care about, which is justice, which is that people are treated with full dignity, that they too have the experience of liberty and freedom. For me, I think that what makes advocates at my level, like at a grass tops level, right? Not on the ground level, is to have that curiosity, and that if you don't have the experience, to integrate the knowledge of those experiences which you're seeking to govern. And I'll give you an example. My parents, and my dad especially, was always like, don't be institutionalized. And what that means is to be a stickler of academia, the academy, or, a large corporate entity or bureaucracy like a municipality like the County of Los Angeles. You can't be tethered to these things, because they're not necessarily real, and they're most certainly not everything. And there were a lot of lessons that I learned in my household. I think the first one, and it's less so for my generation, is that social stratification wasn't as robust and pernicious. So the people that were our family friends and in our ecosystem, and obviously in our family, some were high school dropouts and some had PhDs. But I think that there was a clear thread, which was they were social workers, or they were teachers, or they worked for a union, or they were working on poverty alleviation. Didn't grow up around bankers or lawyers. So for me, that's why I said, what my career has been is very much a testament to my childhood and my community and my parents. And really, the apple did not fall far. It did moonshot. But there are still clear things that I have to police myself on. So when I worked for, the second largest justice department in the country, I was around people that all had college degrees, if not more degrees, like myself. Based on my childhood, that is not a good thing, because that's not the real world. And so here I am working on issues that are hitting the news: unaccompanied minors, cyber exploitation, campus sexual assault, policing. And so what I did is I stopped driving to work and started taking the bus. And that's important. And that means more time away and different things, but that means you're in the city. Zoom was very difficult during COVID-19 because for those of us that had safety, we were able to shelter in place. Not everybody had that opportunity. And technology made it very easy to access power and to connect. And so to be an advocate, if you're an advocate for people and change, you've got to be around people. And if you're not going to do that, then you need to start creating bigger spheres of information gathering. And that's why I created LPPI. There's just an absolute neglect of non-white life in this country. and putting it at a university where the powers that be would recognize that as reputable. But lately I've been really conflicted because I worked from home. I'll go to meetings, but there isn't an opportunity to go on the bus anywhere. And I don't have, a building ecosystem of working with custodians or the security guards or going, to a deli. And I've really been yearning for it. So one of the things that I've been doing over the last year and a half is going to our public rec here in the city. And then in other cities, I kind of scoped it out, Pasadena, Burbank, Glendale, but I landed and have been going to a pool in South LA for almost the last 18 months. And doing water aerobics because I like it a lot. Like I'll walk or I'll do water aerobics. I'm not going to run or do high intensity. And it's just being a casual participant in a web of our society, which is so beautiful in that this class starts at 6:30 p.m. so that women who work or take care of other people's kids or their kids' kids do all of that and still have a place to go. The teacher, Tracy, is amazing. It's like 4 times a week. There's 40 to 60 Black women, all ages, all sizes, older. And it's a great workout and it's, you're just in this space. So I think what is helpful to being an effective advocate is to have the self-awareness that you need to be in community and you need to change your environment if your environment becomes too homogeneous.
I love that. Thank you, Sonja. The next question is for you, Liz. What practical steps can organizations take to ensure that they're creating a pathway for Latinas and other represented groups to advance into leadership roles?
Hire more Latinas. I mean, I really respect a lot of what, Sonja says and what she does. And, even getting out there and riding the bus made me think of that story about when Winston Churchill read the subway when he was trying to decide how to approach some aspect of World War II. I forget, I'm not exactly a historian with that, but yeah, I mean, being with the community is very important. I don't think that corporate HR departments have the same attitude. And I think what we who work in corporations, and I took this very seriously when I was at CBRE, we have to introduce the corporations to our society. We have to be on panels. We have to be talking about what we do. I don't know how many Latinas are aware of commercial real estate other than sometimes being a property manager or, doing some other kind of aspect around facility management. There are very few Latina brokers, and it's a very lucrative job. There are very few Latinas who are in the management role in commercial real estate, and it can be highly lucrative. I think those of us in the corporations need to educate people who are not in the corporations. Maybe they're first gen. Maybe they just haven't had access to people in corporations. The HR people are going to take the usual role of going to the schools like USC, UCLA, others that have, real estate departments, and it'll be we call it the USC frat boy, network. Who knows whose uncle is in it, whose dad is in it, sometimes whose mom or aunt, right? But we in the corporations have a duty to get the word out into what a corporation is, what is your role in it, what are the opportunities, and come apply, right? It's not that attractive to a lot of people. And when I was trying to, spread the word about, commercial real estate to Latinas, specifically Latinas, it's not very sexy. It's not very, it's not our community. You're not like doing better for the world by selling, a multi-family housing thing to a developer. But it is lucrative, and we need more voices, and we need more people like us and people who have an understanding what our community is. And when I did come across a Latina or Latino broker, there are more Latino brokers, I think, we would talk about that. How do we do good in doing well? And I think that has to be a big conversation within corporations. And until that happens, we're not really going to move the ball with Latinos. The other thing I will bring up on a kind of sad point is because of the Supreme Court decision with regards to affirmative action acceptance in public education, there has been a whole host of litigation against private and public organizations, colleges, companies, et cetera, that has scared corporations. Not only scared them, but has had them roll back any DE&I inroads that we made after George Floyd in 2020. Like, I know CBRE dismantled theirs. And by the way, they dismantled theirs after I left. And I was a very big proponent of DE&I, but they've completely dismantled it. And they're not the only corporation. There are a lot of corporations dismantling it. So the lucha, you know, we have to be stronger. We have to raise our voices. We have to, within the corporation and outside of it, we need to make demands on how many top executives are Latino or Latina. You know, there are other groups that aren't shy about that. And we need to be more demanding about that. And, you know, we have to overcome some cultural barriers, but I don't think that we have those cultural barriers as strong as we used to. We need to go into the boardroom and say, how many people on your board are Latino or Latina? How many people in your executive management are Latino or Latina? We have to hold corporations responsible because they're not going to do it themselves.
Thank you, Liz. And yes, La Lucha Sigue, it's an ongoing effort that we have. The next question is, what advice would you give to other Latina professionals aspiring to enter the sectors? I know we just talked about continuing that effort.
Don't be scared. I mean, I have to say, I love LinkedIn because it has democratized a lot of this world. Go into LinkedIn. See what people you know are doing. Who else do they know? Have a coffee, have a Zoom interview, do whatever you need to do, but learn about the different areas. If you're just starting or if you want to transition, what do you do? Like, what is corporate real estate or commercial real estate? What is happening in the energy industry? Like, what's your background? Do you know anybody who does this? And put yourself out there. There are a lot of people who offer to mentor who don't get called. There are a lot of people who wish they had a mentor who don't make the ask, and I think mentorship's thrown around a lot. You don't have to find a mentor if you want to have a cafecito with someone. That doesn't have to be a mentor, but go learn. Who else do they know? And use the democracy of LinkedIn to your advantage. And maybe that's just one, but do you go to a college or a university or a graduate school? Use that placement office. I'm on the board of USC Law School, and we hear that the placement office says, "Oh, we told everybody we would pay for their bar prep for free. We've had 5 people come in," right? Like, oh, how strong have you been about telling people that, right? Like, I don't know. Even my kids who went to college somewhere out, I used to have to say, "Go talk to your professor. Go talk to that administrator. Go make that relationship." Don't be shy. People need each other. I know I'm on a soapbox on that, so I'm going to get off.
Thank you.
I want to just echo what Liz shared. LinkedIn has democratized access to information and the network. So much of professional and business occupations is networks. That's how people get jobs. That's how people leave jobs, go to other jobs, hear about opportunities, mention and share information about other opportunities. And so what she was mentioning is really look at LinkedIn for what people are doing and what they're saying about what they're doing. And then you click on their profile and you see their trajectory, and you'll likely see a lot of the jungle gym that Liz mentioned, right? It's not a ladder. And you'll also be able to see who they're networked with. And some people you will know, others you won't. Click on those. It's really a curiosity. It's a Wikipedia of our professional life at a global level, while also being a local level, a sectorial level, whatever. For me, I find it incredibly relevant in hiring and looking at people's profiles. And I'm not looking at it like a resume. I'm looking about who they're connected with. And that is not just an organization, it's other people. Some of us have a consistency about us where we're trusted colleagues. And so connections with people like that go a long way. And there's always going to be the informal vetting for positions. And in some ways, that's very hard for women, right? Whisper campaigns. LinkedIn is a strategy for understanding the other people that you can activate. And I find it incredibly useful and follow folks that I've never met in real life in the ways that I think people do on Instagram, and really have learned a lot about leadership through it. They also have certifications and all kinds of stuff. That being said, like, it's an excellent platform. I think you should invest. You know, you don't have to spend all your time there, but use it like you use Wikipedia.
Thank you, Sonja and Liz. And we have two more questions, and we want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A. So we'll do them quick. So we obviously know both of you are very passionate about the work you do and very high leadership roles. But what other opportunities have you taken advantage to create meaningful impact on social justice? How did you leverage your career to take advantage of those opportunities, and specifically in the nonprofit boards and philanthropic side of things?
I'll start. I think that everybody has different constraints and areas of flexibility. And I say this very seriously. At the Institute I co-founded, we did research on Latinas in the pandemic. Latinas left the labor force more than any other group. We followed up a year later to think about caretaking in the home amongst heterosexual households across races. For all races except Latino, the male increased their caregiving work in hours during COVID-19. Latinos did not. Latinas did. And so these other things that oftentimes are unpaid are not realistic because of structural and systemic inequality that does not support women and families. So I just want to start there. They're also unrealistic because they're often unpaid. So we'll also continue. I'm not motivated by money because I shop at the Goodwill and I get everything I need for the most part. So I also don't necessarily monetize my skills. I've never worked in the private sector. I've always been public service, again, modeling what my limitations were in terms of my upbringing. And so I have been very civically engaged on a number of boards. And I think that it's important, but I also really think that there's a strategy that needs to happen. And the sooner you learn this, the better it is, because these can suck up time. And time is one of our most valuable resources and assets. And so oftentimes, people want to get on a board just to get on a board, and there's programs to get you on. I really encourage you to think more about, what interests you? What do you want to be doing with your time? Especially if you don't want to be doing what you're doing at work, even though you're an expert. So maybe you don't want to be on a board and be the finance person or the legal person. That's absolutely okay. Set that boundary and that expectation. And think about those boards. If ultimately, you have a goal, right? You want to be on a board where you're networking and growing your business. Start thinking about what boards are going to be good for that. Is that going to be, a YMCA, an ACLU, a museum? And then there are ways where these boards are kind of training boards to bigger organizations. Within boards, they have varying levels of organization. Maybe they have committees, maybe they don't. But I'll give you an example of my most recent yeses. One was 4.5 years ago, to be on the redistricting commission for the city of Los Angeles. I love redistricting. I love voting rights. It was unexpected. Came a day before they announced. I was not running for a board, not trying to get anything, but like the Goodwill, redistricting is my jam. That was a time suck. It was an incredible privilege, but it was countless hours. It was like a whole nother job. And ultimately, the powers that be did not honor the work of the volunteer commission and all of the hours that Angelino spent in engaging with us. I learned a lot from that board. My goal of being in the board was to be the little one, the younger one, and just kind of learn, right? Get a sense from all of these other veteranos and what have you. I ended up in true Diaz fashion leading. And so you kind of align yourself with your values, you create new networks and relationships, and you also have to take risks. You're out there, it's public facing, you're not going to be popular. Two other boards that I think are important. One, I sit on the Regional Advisory Council for LAist, formerly KPCC. And I had been wanting to get into a cultural media board because I'm interested in culture, in media, and in the arts. And so this was perfect. You know, another person on the main board, the big board, sponsored me, and happy to do it because it really added diversity to my work. I was also starting to do research on media representation, and there were ways that I could be supportive of the radio media property. Still on that board. The other one is a legal nonprofit in New York, Latino Justice Pearl F, a Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Educational Fund. The reason I did that was it was a Northeast Chicago, Southeast kind of board, so I could expand my network there. It's a very corporate board in terms of its composition of having people that are at major law firms or financial institutions, which is not my network that I wanted to expand. You know, I have strong network and colleagues in philanthropy, in news, in the academy, in government, but private is a place where I can improve. And ultimately, I wouldn't mind being the president of the Ford Foundation or Rockefeller or MacArthur. So having, you know, a nonprofit organization in the Northeast that's legacy would be really helpful. And the last thing I'll say about that is that the way that it's run is very sophisticated, that it's going to prepare me if I want to be able to be on a corporate board. Yeah.
Thank you, Sonja. Liz?
I think giving back to the community while you're holding down a job and maintaining your career and trying to network and everything is very challenging. I do agree 100% with Sonja. Find out what interests you. Like it takes time, and you will get on a committee. You will, if it's nonprofit, you will be expected to do some fundraising. You will be expected to have a strategic view. I mean, being on the board of Hope has been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my life. But we have an amazing executive director who has a fantastic strategy and view of what Latinas can be and what the organization should be, and, you know, supporting that and helping guide her and giving her some advice, fundraising for it. All of that is a joy, but that all is part of being on a board. I also agree with Sonja that it's very important to learn about boards. Boards are not management. Where there's a thing called nose in, hands off, right? So you go in, you learn everything that's going on, you give advice, you direct, you give information, and then you watch the management committee. And if they don't like it, the only thing you can do is fire and hire. And that's really the CEO or executive director. So that's board work. You don't have to be on a board to be philanthropic. You can volunteer for where there's an event. You can get to know, you know, what the work is. And, you know, with MALDEF, for example, I've signed up and done voter registration and vote, you know, redistricting work. I didn't do that when I was an intern. I actually worked on some high impact litigation, but you know, there's lots of opportunities to make your voice heard as a part of the organization and not be on the board. Hope has a bunch of them. So, you know, just reach out to Diana or Leah and we can direct you. And the other thing that I would say is when someone asks you if you're interested, find out all you can about what is the mission of the organization. What is the requirement if it's a nonprofit? There's what they call give and gets. So you have to earn or donate a certain amount of money. Unless it's something like the Ford Foundation where they're, you know, self-funded, or Mackenzie Scott Foundation, you know, but even then you have to be aligned with what their mission is and how they operate. Because boards are organizations and groups of people who want to be comfortable with each other as they proceed. So there's definitely cultures to different boards, but you don't have to be on a board. Find charities that you like, find organizations that you like, find efforts that you like. I mean, I know there's a lot of campaigns, and I'm not going to say Democrat or Republican because we're nonpartisan here, but there are a lot of campaigns that could use your help. And if you speak Spanish, even more. If you speak Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, even more. So, just get involved where you can.
Thank you, Liz and Sonja, for your amazing sharings that you did today. But I know we have about a minute or two, actually like 3 minutes, but I only see one question in the chat box from Marbella Avalos. And her question is, what systems or processes do you use for self-reflection and introspection? I don't know if either one want to answer.
Yeah, I go on walks and I've made a lot of new friends this year, which is always nice to get to know people and having that cadence of weekly seeing this person and just walking. For me, I also have worked with a therapist on and off since law school. I found that to be very helpful for my own personal journey. And finally, I think that, in terms of my own household, there's a big separation between work and our family life. And so not in the same field, maybe planets away. And that separation is really good because it's not all consuming.
Yeah, my sisters would tell you that I'm Liz exercises the answer Atlee. So I actually meditate and swim. So I was a swimmer in college, and I go and do a little workout where I go through the chakras of the body and then finish with Om. And that I can get into the pool like stress, and then I come out like a different person. But if there's something that you can find that relaxes you, I know my sister journals, my son journals, my daughters go to therapy. I think therapy is very healthy, very important. It's good to have someone who is, if it's covered through your work or you can afford it through the Affordable Care Act, it's really important to have someone who's professional who can guide you to what questions you should ask and maybe where you should look for answers. And yeah, I think all of those are really healthy. And eat right and sleep. Sleep is really important.
Definitely. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I think that's it, or any hands, unless I'm missing in. No. So thank you so much for your time. I think we're going to cut right at 1, actually. It was such an honor to be able to moderate, but also to hear all the amazing things you ladies have done and are doing and the advice you have given our network. So thank everybody for joining us today. We hope you'll join us in the last and next Hope Hour, which is September 26th. So please check our website, social media to maintain informed of our upcoming events. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, Leah, for moderating. And thanks so much for sharing, Liz.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.